Welcome back. I'm Terry Burns, and this is a continuation of my course on the Monas Hieroglyphica or Hieroglyphic Monad of Dr. John Dee. We're up to Theorem 15. In fact, we finished it, and all I'm going to do here is go over the answers to the homework assignment that I gave you last class, which was basically how to project different of his ideas of the planet onto the tree of life. I'm assuming, of course, that you know who John Dee is, you know what the Monas Hieroglyphica is, and you have been studying along with me through the first 15 theorems. If not, well, the playlist of the whole course is below. You might find that helpful. I'm not sure that you'll be able to follow along here, although if you are part of a modern esoteric order, you may well recognize the solutions to these homework problems I've given you. In Theorem 15, he gave us several projections upon the tree of life that are part of his Kabbalistic anatomy of his monads. So we'll look at those here. Theorem 15, of course, was very long. It focused on this famous alchemical quote, nature rejoices in nature. And then we looked at his different meanings of exalt, puns between exalt and rejoice in Latin. And we also noticed some things with this drawing he gives you that look a little bit odd. That is, since exalt means rise above, that the exaltations of the sun here are at the bottom. So we have talked a little bit about what exaltation means in terms of astrological signs, Taurus and Aries, and all the play on that something that you exalt or raise up makes you happy. And something of a lower nature will rejoice and be exalted by something of a higher nature. Let's see. We also put this back into the context, of course, of the Emerald Tablet, this being a Hermetic work. So the sun and the moon are both exalted in the Emerald Tablet, and they give birth to the one thing, that is the monad. So when we look at this Kabbalistic anatomy, we're also going to need to look at the symbols of the planets that he corrected in Theorems 13 and 14. And remember that one of his meanings of the interior anatomy or interior astronomy, astrology, is the middle pillar. So now, if we look at his symbol of Mars that he gave back in those earlier theorems, it's not our symbol of Mars. It's this little glyph that just popped up on your screen. Okay, so I also ask you to remember which Sephira he'd referred particular planets to. It's the same as in Agrippa. It's the same that modern esotericists use and Hermetic Kabbalists. So then you also remember how he has projected Mercury onto the tree of life. And so he's now going to project Mars and Venus onto the tree of life. And I gave you some hints about this, but you want to do it yourself. The idea being nature rejoices in nature. You're anointing yourself by realizing everything that is a part of you in contexts that relate directly to the ones he's been using. Remember, it was the planets that in the world of becoming in the Timaeus, the 7 planets order things. In terms of Kabbalah, the 7 Hebrew double letters are associated with the planets. Also, each emanation of God on the tree of life is associated with the planet, except for the very first 2, the first one being associated with the prima mobile and the second, the entire zodiac. So you're going to work through how to do this, and you have using these glyphs. And if you haven't, I'm about to solve it for you. So if you haven't tried to solve this on your own, maybe you want to do so now. Make, again, Mars the Zaire pin. That's a definition you should know by now. Do the same thing with Venus, except try to find a way to have the head include the 3 supernals, and you will wind up with something like this. First, I suggested you review how to put Mercury on there. He gave you 4 Mercury glyphs, so you're going to use this one, which is the one that gets associated with the Sephira Gebura, and you get something that exactly matches his concept of dot in Theorem 10. It's one of the ways reverse engineering that makes me unable to prove, but sure, that Dee had the concept of dot, because it further matches the one that Gikatia talks about, which you remember Riccio translated, Reuchlin appropriates, and Dee appropriates Reuchlin, and so forth. That is, the middle pillar pierces through, or the monad or stillbone or whatever stillbone associated with Mercury pierces through at this point, creates first the middle pillar, and then the tree polarizes. And so that Mercury still bone will become also the philosophic Mercury in another glyph. If you see my cursor, the little Aries glyph at the bottom, you have his whole monad, which is helping you work back up the tree. So now let's go on to his little glyph of Mars. You would get something like this. That is, now you have his Aries symbol firing you back up the tree. And in that theorem, you have the idea of the sun associated with Tifereth, where my cursor is there, reaching down. But Tifereth is also associated with the entire Zairanpin or Zauranpin, depending on how you want to pronounce it. That is the 5 other Sephiroth that are connected with Tifereth, which is 7. And if you include Dot, excuse me, the first was 6. If you include Dot, then you have 7 here. If you go on and project Mercury onto the tree of life, you get the upper part of the tree as the head with Dot there in the middle. And then you get the bottom part of it as the cross of the elements. Now, if the cross of the elements is usually associated with Earth, why with both Mercury and Venus would we get a cross of the elements there? There's also, as I've mentioned before, another idea that within each of these sephira, you have little fractal versions of the entire tree. And so if you considered that maybe one of the reasons he's using the metaphor of physical alchemy for his spiritual alchemy is because he is looking at all of the a kind of smaller fractal version of all of the Sephiroth in Malkuth, then you have an answer for the question I posed to you about the cross of the elements. Okay, so this is basically the solution to your homework. Thanks to Alan Moore for making these graphics for me. Those of you who have been his students in years past, if you were part of the independent Kabbalistically based initiatory society that he was a hierophant for many years, you may recognize the ones to the right and the left and not the ones in the middle. Let me tell you why. These symbols of Mercury on the tree of life and Venus on the tree of life are still used in modern esoterica. If you look, for example, at Regardie's 1937 publications of the secrets of the Stella Matutina or Golden Dawn, or you look at the knowledge lectures of the many, many Golden Dawn spin-offs, and those include ones that use Greek, like the Aurum Solum, those who have kicked out the Enochian, like Bota, Crowley's AA. You can find something like these too. Why not the ones in the middle? Well, I'm fairly sure that, and by the way, in Regardie, this picture that you see on one side is from the Practicus knowledge lecture, and on the other side from the Philosophus knowledge lecture. Well, it seems to me the most likely source of these is Dee's Monas Hieroglyphica. The one of Mars seems to not take, and there's an obvious reason for that. It's that his symbol for Mars doesn't stick. It's not really used by Hermeticists and esotericists between the Monas Hieroglyphica and now. So it seems to have dropped out, while the ones of Venus and Mercury have not. Anyway, there is the solution to your homework. So remember, nature rejoices in nature. And as you realize how you are constructed by this energy, so this line of thinking goes, you're anointing yourself by realizing everything is a part of you, and as above, so below. Now, in the next theorem, first of all, we won't get to the next theorem for about 10 days because I'm taking a little time off. As I mentioned, I have some traveling I want to do, but we're going to look at the origin of modern esotericists' LVX set of symbols. And the only known source of this is the next theorem. Theorem 16. In fact, this is the theorem that 2 decades ago got me so interested and excited in trying to figure out what exactly John Dee was doing in his hieroglyphic monad. So that's where we're going. It may be 10 days or so before I get there, but I look forward to seeing you all then. Have a great day. Bye-bye.